Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this December 23rd, 2014 edition of Nightcast. Friends, our opening story tonight will come out of Europe, and it relates to the dateline on tonight's opening story. Actually goes back to last Wednesday, December 17. Today's the 23rd. Let me see, did I do that right? 22nd was Monday, 21st was Sunday, 20th was Saturday, 19th was Friday, 18th, 17th, Wednesday. This news story from Wednesday of last week, I believe, strongly relates to what happened on Friday with Hamas lobbing rockets into Israel again, and Israel responding, as we told you in last night's news, Israel responding with an airstrike bombing a Hamas facility. This news story from last Wednesday, I believe we covered this in Wednesday or Thursday's report last week, but I'm going to go over it again because who would have expected that by Friday, just 2 days later, Hamas would be firing rockets into Israel again, breaking the truce that goes back to August this year, the truce with Israel. This story reads, the caption on this story, friends, reads, this is from last Wednesday now, Hamas is designated a terrorist group by many nations, but to its supporters, it is a resistant movement. That's the caption in this, with that photograph, this opening photograph for this story. But listen to this. A top court of the European Union has annulled the bloc's decision to keep the Palestinian Islamist movement Hamas on a list of terrorist groups. They've annulled that, putting them on that terrorist group list. The decision had been based not on an examination of Hamas actions, but on, quote, factual imputations derived from the press and the internet, judges found. The court said the move was technical and not a reassessment of Hamas classification as a terrorist group. It said a funding freeze on the group would continue for the time being. Hamas dominates Gaza and fought a 50-day war with Israel earlier this year, in the summer this year. The movement is committed to Israel's destruction. Let me repeat that part of this story, friends. The movement is committed, the Hamas movement is committed to Israel's destruction. Responding to the ruling, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Hamas was a murderous terrorist organization which should be put back on the list immediately. Now, that was Prime Minister Netanyahu's response to last Wednesday's news of Hamas being taken off, being annulled from the terrorist list. He said they should be put back on the list immediately. And, you know, friends, he's right. And by 2 days later, by Friday, Hamas had broken the truce, the August truce with Israel, and was lobbing rockets again into Israel. Israel, the United States, and several other nations have designated Hamas a terrorist organization due to its long record of attacks and its refusal to renounce violence. Hamas, which was founded in 1987, won Palestinian parliamentary elections in 2006 and reinforced its power in Gaza the following year after ousting its Fatah rivals. Its supporters see it as a legitimate resistance movement against Israel with whom it has fought, now the news story says, friends, for years. But, for a little emphasis, we could say decades. And if you know the real truth of this, the hostility, the animosity goes back for millennia, multiple millennia, about 3,500 years worth, back to the time of Abraham and Hagar and Sarah. And just as I stated it, Hagar was in the middle of the relationship between Abraham and his wife, Sarah, when she had agreed to bear a child on Sarah's knees that would be considered, for all practical purposes, Sarah's child. But Hagar began to flaunt the fact that it was her child. And, that's understandable, friends. I mean, a mother's natural love for her child is probably going to break a lot of agreements. And so Sarah became jealous of Hagar acting pompous around her. Instead of being her handmaid anymore, she was Miss Toodaloo because, hey, she was the mother of Abraham's child, his first child. Even though technically, as God put it one place in the Bible, when he called Isaac Abraham's legitimate son, that tells you the other son was, if the one son was the one legitimate son, that means the other son was, in God's eyes, an illegitimate son. But God, in his great mercy, decided to bless the offspring of Abraham by Hagar and promised him that his offspring would become 12 great chiefs, having chieftains throughout the land where God would give to them. But that was not the land that God promised to Isaac as the blessing to Abraham for his faithfulness, blessing Abraham's offspring to become as numberless as the stars of the heaven and as the sand of the seashore. So that animosity goes back to 3,500 years ago, to the time again of Abraham and his wife Sarah and Sarah's handmaid Hagar, who bore Ishmael, who is the father of the Arab people, of the Palestinian people, whatever modern-day terms we should use to designate the people that are over there fighting against Israel now, and fighting with a hatred that goes back in their blood thousands of years, millennia, multiple millennia. So anybody who thinks they're going to go over there and settle this thing, like some of the news reports said, the peace negotiations have been off since, earlier last year. Well, big deal. We're talking about a problem that is multiple millennia in its origin. And you're not going to resolve that problem overnight. That problem is not going to be resolved until Jesus Christ returns. And anybody who doesn't understand that is a little bit loony, a little bit insane. They are not in touch with reality, because reality is multiple millennia. This problem goes back. It's a problem that's become a problem of a spiritual nature, and until the heart is changed, which only Jesus Christ will be able to do to the degree that's necessary to resolve this situation, friends, that problem in the Middle East will continue, will grow worse. Prophecy tells us that at a point not too far from now, in the future, the king of the south will push against the king of the north, which will be that seventh and final head of the Holy Roman Empire, coming soon to a Europe near you, when the Pope goes over to Germany, to that city in Germany, Frankfurt, where the headquarters for the ECB is, and where the Emperor's Hall is located in the Rome, in the Romex, the Rome building, the building of Rome, where the City Hall in Frankfurt, where on the second floor resides is located the Emperor's Hall, which some of you from history know that the Allied forces bombed all of that complex, including the Emperor's Hall, toward the end of World War II. However, thanks to the good old taxpayers of the United States and the generosity of the American people through the Marshall Plan, the Emperor's Hall was rebuilt courtesy of the United States, making that building where the Pope and the Vatican, sending over the Pope. The Pope has always been the one who has put the crowns on the heads of the emperors of the Holy Roman Empire. The only one he didn't technically, physically crown was Napoleon, and he would have crowned Napoleon. The Pope was there for that coronation ceremony, had the crown in his hands to put on the head of Napoleon, but Napoleon was so impatient, and Napoleon grabbed the crown out of the Pope's hands and put it on his own head. But still, the Pope was there conducting the coronation ceremony, and it was, in history, it was the Pope crowning Napoleon too, and then in 1814, and so a history that runs back from 554 A.D., when Justinian restored the imperial government of the Roman Empire after it had taken a deadly wound, after the three barbarian roots were plucked up. The three barbarian governments were plucked up at their roots at the behest of the Pope, nonetheless. He couldn't ride those barbarians. So the prophecy about the woman in the Bible being, in religious terms, symbolically a religious organization, a church. And the head of that church, the Pope, was not able to ride those three barbaric governments of the Heruli, the other two. He caused them to be plucked up by the roots. It caused the Roman Empire to take a deadly wound. And then it was not until Justinian came to power in 554 A.D. that the Roman Empire was revived. And then the Pope, in conjunction with councils of Nicaea and Laodicea, was able to mount the Roman Empire and become as if it were like a man who rides a horse. He's got the reins, like the man who's got the reins. Now, the horse has the power, but the man riding the horse and steering that horse, he's got control of the power. And so the Bible says the woman rode the beast, beginning with Justinian, the fourth horn of the seventh head of the beast that Revelation 13, verse 1 calls the beast that comes out of the sea. That's the same, essentially, it's the same four beast of Daniel 7, with the fourth beast having a head with 10 horns. The first three horns are plucked up by their roots. The last remaining 7 horns are the equivalent of the 7 heads that are on the beast that comes up out of the land, which Revelation 13, beginning in verse 11, calls another beast. So Revelation 13 has 2 beasts. One that comes up from out of the sea, that's the equivalent of the 4 beasts of Daniel 7, and then the other beast, beginning to be described in verse 11, that comes up from the ground, from the land beast, that has 7 heads on it, and it's the equivalent of the last remaining 7 horns of that fourth head of that ocean beast. And it's also synonymous with its 7th head has 10 horns on it, but those aren't the same 10 horns that are on the 7th head of the fourth beast, of the beast that comes up from out of the sea. The 10 horns on the 7th head of the beast from verse 11, Revelation 13, the beast from the land, those 10 horns on that 7th beast are equivalent to the 10 toes on the 2 feet made of partly of iron and partly of clay that are part of the 2 legs that are part of the great image of Daniel 2. Daniel 2, that great image, beginning as Daniel told King Nebuchadnezzar that head of gold was you, King Nebuchadnezzar, and after you, the breast and arms of silver would be still a world-ruling empire, but inferior to you, the head of gold. And then after it would be the belly and thighs of brass, and so another government that would be yet inferior, still yet, as brass is inferior to silver, silver inferior to gold. So we're getting less and less quality of government. And then finally, the two legs of iron, which represent the eastern and western divisions of Rome. Iron, a very strong government, two legs of iron. And so those two legs, those long legs, stretched through a period of history that runs 1,260 years from, actually a little bit before that, because the three that get plucked up from the roots, they're part of those of the Roman Empire, illustrated in the Bible symbolically by those legs. But then from 554 to 1814, we have a 1,260-year period where the Roman Empire is boom, boom. But then with Napoleon's defeat in the Battle of Waterloo, the Roman Empire is dissolved, and it goes into the pit for a little over 100 years until 1936, when Mussolini invades Ethiopia and proclaims to the world that he has revived the Holy Roman Empire. And it didn't get a lot of fanfare, but he had a concordance with the Vatican. He did, in fact, restore the Holy Roman Empire, although very short-lived, for only 9 years, between 1936 until 1945, until April 28, 1945, when Mussolini was hung upside down along with his mistress and his comrades from the canopy of an Esso gasoline station in Italy. That put the Holy Roman Empire back into the abyss. Now, many people who study religion and history, they know that the 7 kings mentioned in Revelation 17:10, they know who 5 of those kings are, which Revelation refers to as 5 kings. There are 7 kings, it says, and 5 are fallen. Now, many people in history know that the 5 who are fallen are the 5 that began with Justinian and ended with Napoleon. And what would that leave? 3 in between, Otto and Charlemagne and Charles V. And so that's a fact of history. You can look that up in encyclopedias even, and especially in religious commentaries. But even in encyclopedias will tell you who those 5 kings who are fallen were. That's a known fact, but not until 1936, when Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong was in his 40s and doing a national radio broadcast coast to coast in the United States, and even from some stations outside the United States, a powerful 100,000-watt station out of Mexico, booming into the United States and Canada. Mr. Armstrong was the first one to announce that Mussolini's claim to have revived the Holy Roman Empire made him that 6th of those 7 kings. It made him that 6th head of a short-lived, 9-year-long revived Holy Roman Empire. And then that put the Holy Roman Empire back into the abyss, back into the pit. And the 7th head, I don't have my chart. I wish I had my chart. I've got a nice illustrative chart. Many of you have seen. I put it up on the screen many a time. We're on a backup system. I'm still working on the backup system. I've got one more piece of equipment to purchase to get our main system back since we crashed it after I increased the memory. And our outside consultant said, hey, you shouldn't have put in that extra memory until you put in a triple power supply, because now you crashed it and blew some stuff. So we'll be putting that back together. I'll be purchasing that piece of equipment right after the first of the year, friends. So some things we have to be patient. We have to operate how we can operate. I'm operating in a limited fashion now, but thankfully, God has pulled me back from a near-death illness about, what was that, 4, 5, 6 weeks ago. Some of you may remember when I was having to pitch for prayer. I was in very serious health situation. Now I'm back on top. You can hear, yeah, even with limited equipment, I'm able to speak to you. And tonight I'm just speaking ad lib, extemporaneously, and just sharing some thoughts with you as we see things get very, very serious in the world. I got a couple more stories. We got to get to these, friends. Just sharing with you off the cuff. But let's go to the next story. Our next story. In December 2001, I got just a little bit more on that last story, friends. Wait a minute. Let's go back to that photograph we had. Let's stay with this story just for another moment. This is important, related to the European Union. This is most important news we can be covering, anything related to that European Union, and things that will trigger it to coming together into a confederation such that it will elect one to be over them who, in a concordant with the Vatican, they'll have the Pope come over and crown that one they give their power to. And it'll, if history repeats itself, and one thing we've been taught that history does repeat itself, and to watch history, it's always been done this way. The emperors of the Holy Roman Empire have been crowned by the Pope. The coronation ceremonies have been in Frankfurt, Germany, inside the Emperor's Hall. No reason why that should change. So we'll look for that. Of course, we'll also be alert to, just in case, the God of this world, is the real engineer behind almost everything going on in the world right now, including some news tonight we'll be covering out of France about those 3 incidents that have happened Saturday, Sunday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. He's behind those, and he's behind even what's happening right now in the United States, with the United States being blessed with a NIMBY-PAMBY administration that is, as many of my friends have said, Steve, that's the curse that the United States is under. Is part of it is having in administration over us what the Bible says don't do. It says don't put a stranger in charge of your country. And all of that's working, and don't put, how does it say, children? And children are often referred to as strangers, children, strangers. So don't put a child, in charge of your country. And we've got administration now that is naive to a lot of things that should be held in check. We're opening up our borders. We're opening up relations with a communist country down in Cuba, and that allows all kind of potential for just coming across from Cuba into the country, with no borders on those shores. That just opens up potential for all kind of destructive problems to come into this country. We're seeing it happen in France. Just wait, friends, what you're hearing about that's happened in France. God will allow that if we don't repent of our sins. As Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28. I keep repeating those for you. I hope as some of you hear those 2 chapters, you'll take the time to flip open your Bible, sit down with it, and read it, and see if what I tell you is not there. I've read it to you many times. Tonight, though, I need to move to some stories here quickly in a moment, but let me just give you a summary outline. At the beginning of both of those chapters, Deuteronomy 28, Leviticus 26. Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28. It begins with God saying, if you diligently hearken to the voice of the Eternal and obey all of my commands, my statutes, my laws, I will put blessings upon you like you won't believe. I'll give you rain in due season. I'll make you the head, not the tail. As far as a nation goes, and rain in due season is an individual blessing plus a national blessing, because if you got fruit trees in your backyard and God is giving you rain in due season, he's saying, I'm going to bless your fruit trees. And in fact, he even says, I'll bless the fruit of your orchards. And I'll make you as a nation, I'll make you the lender, not the borrower. I'll have with your enemies 5 of you, I'll bless you. 5 of you will chase away 100, because I, the Eternal, am behind you and fighting your wars for you, really. But if you disobey me, just the opposite of those things, you won't get the rain, you'll get floods, you'll get too much water in some places and droughts in others. I'll make you the borrower, not the lender. And what is the United States? Friends, if that one thing alone doesn't tell you, hey, this nation is under a curse. We're a borrower nation, not a lender, and we keep having to raise our debt ceiling. That's telling you, as God says, if you don't obey me, I'll put these curses upon you, and if you still don't obey me, the curses will be multiplied 7 times over. And then if you still don't obey me, I'll break the pride of your power. And if we don't repent, friends, we can expect to see that verse come full force, full flush into our faces. And what you're seeing now happen in France, you'll be seeing happen here. We're already seeing disturbances. That's part of the 4th seal. The 4th seal, Jesus Christ said, was primarily loimos, a Greek word meaning disease epidemics, pestilences, the plagues of Egypt. But he also said that between the 3rd seal and the 5th seal, when he spoke in plain language in Matthew 28, Mark 13, Luke 21, he said that at the same time as the 4th seal, there would be seismus, there would be seismic activity increasing, commotions in the air, such as gale force winds of all kinds, tornadoes, hurricanes, commotions on the ground, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, fires, floods, you name it, any kind of commotion like that. And he also said that there would be, now that was seismus, meaning seismic activity and conditions. Christ also used the Greek term that only Mark recorded in Mark 13:8, but he's speaking of the same time that Christ was speaking of these things when Christ said there would be terike, there would be disturbances, there would be troubled waters, both literally and figuratively in the sense of mobs and seditions. And we're seeing a lot of that. And he was saying when these things increase, then know. Well, he gave the parable example of the fig tree. When you see its leaves become tender and begin to sprout, you know that summer is nigh. And he said, likewise, when you see these things increase, he's telling you the 5th seal is on the horizon. The first 4 seals are active now. White horse, 1st seal, false religion. Revelation 12:9 says the great dragon, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, deceives the whole world. And he does that through a religious organization he's built up. The 2nd seal, the red horse of war and rumors of war and world war, kingdom against kingdom, nation against nation. We've only seen that since last century, 1914, 1999, First World War, round 1. Then a long recess until 1939, 1940. Round 2 began, ending in 1945. Now we're in another recess, awaiting round 3, which will make round 1 and round 2 look like child's play by comparison. Or as one man put it, would make those 2 wars look like rounds of war, look like rounds of World War, look like a picnic. Because now we've got nuclear weaponry of mass destruction to do incredible damage. It could blow up the mankind 44, 50, 100, 200 times over, and as one man put it, Mr. Herbert Armstrong said it, at only one time would be enough. You annihilate mankind one time, that's it. He's wiped off the face of this earth. But Jesus Christ says in Matthew 24, around verses 20, 21, 22, that for the elect's sake, he'll cut it short, just before mankind would blow up all of mankind. But the 3rd seal, the black horse of famine, and I mentioned that 4th seal, the pale horse, I mentioned its elements to you, friends. And so when those things increase, we know that, and those things are active now, we know that the 5th seal is nigh. The 5th seal is the Great Tribulation, the time of a revived Holy Roman Empire, a new emperor who will become crowned by the Pope, who in the Emperor's Hall in Frankfurt, Germany, in that coronation ceremony the Pope will conduct. which will revive the Holy Roman Empire, making that emperor the seventh and final head of a revived Holy Roman Empire. That'll be the time of World War III. That'll be the time of the greatest martyrdom of God's saints that has ever happened. But, friends, you can escape it. If God has called you to the spring harvest and you do what Christ said in Luke 21, verse 36, where he said, watch these things. Watch these first four seals as they become active and pray about them. Watch and pray always, putting your heart into your prayers, putting yourself into today's world news, asking God to intervene and help the people that are afflicted by it, and to bring, as Christ told us in the model prayer, pray, thy kingdom come, O Lord God. Put your heart into that and ask, as you see these news stories, God, bring your kingdom. And stop all this hellish mess that we're seeing in the nightly news. Friends, sometimes I have to just tell you candidly, straight from the heart, sometimes I come in here to work on the news and, oh man, I say, why did I ever commit to this? It's depressing. I'd rather be seeing, like a friend of mine, Ken, said, I don't like watching news. It's all bad. I'd rather be doing something, joyful. Well, after you see some of this, put your heart into some believing prayer and pray, thy kingdom come, and say, God, will we ever be glad when you bring this together? And we know you will. And that's where you can get the joy from it. We know you will do it, Father. You'll send Jesus Christ to smash the governments of this world, represented by that great image of Daniel 2. You'll smash it on its toes, meaning the whole thing topples. Not one government of this world left intact. They're going to hate that. They're going to fight Christ. They're going to fight him as if he were an alien from another country coming in. They won't recognize who Christ is, and they'll hate him for saving mankind from destroying himself. They'll hate him for doing away with their government, and they don't look forward to the kingdom of God. They don't realize that's the only way we're going to have peace and resolve all. Israel and the Palestinians is not the only conflict around the world. Anywhere you got groups of people together, it's even happening in the United States now. The United States, we're so divided between the Democrats and the Republicans, and between the whites and the blacks in many cases, I'm sad to say. Thankfully, I had a situation where my truck stalled this afternoon. People in Alabama, we drive pickup trucks. Most people also have a sedan, a family car, but for the most part, a lot of people in Alabama, they drive pickup trucks. They pick up feed for their horses and donkeys and goats and animals with the pickup truck, and just have parties on the back of those pickup trucks. They call them tailgate parties. You flip down your tailgate, put you some hay back there, and lean up against the hay and pop open your sodas or beers and pizzas and fellowship from the back of a tailgate of a pickup truck. Everybody meet in the park or wherever and back your trucks up together in a circle, and there's your tailgate party right there. And mine stalled, and as I'm pushing it backward to getting it into a parking space, big, husky, black fellow came up. I smiled to see him come up. He said, hey, can I help you? And he got on the front, started pushing, and we got that thing going so good that he said, jump in, steer it. So I had to jump in and steer it into the parking space, and then we got it, and then my reverse went out. So I was able to pull out of there without a problem after I did my business in town. But friends, that was just mentioning, though, thankfully there's some of us still love one another of different races, but we're having a big potential cultural racial problem inside the United States, growing in a certain way that's sad to see. But when Jesus Christ turns, thankfully, we'll learn how to love one another. Back to this story out of Europe. In December 2001, the Council of the European Union, representing the governments of member states, adopted a, quote, common position and a regulation to combat terrorism. It established a list of designated entities and people whose funds would be frozen. Hamas military wing, the Oh, there's a brigade. The Is al-Din Qassam Brigades was named on the initial list, and its political wing was added 2 years later. Hamas contested the decision, and on Wednesday, this last week, the EU's General Court found it had been, quote, based not on facts examined and confirmed in decisions of competent authorities, but on factual imputations derived from the press and the internet, end quote. The court said it was therefore annulling Hamas designation, but would temporarily keep existing measures against the group in order to ensure the effectiveness of any possible future freezing of funds. This would be maintained for 3 months, or if an appeal is brought before the European Court of Justice, until it was closed, it added. The court stresses that those annulments on fundamental procedural grounds do not imply any substantive assessment of the question of the classification of Hamas as a terrorist group within the meaning of the common position. Legal jumbo jargon, bumbling bunglestead. Hamas deputy political leader Marzouk said the decision was, quote, a correction of a historical mistake. Makes me want to barf hearing those words. Blah! Hamas is a resistance movement, and it has a natural right, according to all international laws and standards, to resist the occupation, he told the Reuters news agency. But European Commission spokesman Maja Kosciuszko said the EU continued to consider Hamas a terrorist organization and would consider the response to the ruling, The Israeli economy minister called the court's decision immoral. Yeah, I think he's got it right. Israel is strong and can defend itself against its enemies, but those who will suffer from strengthening terrorist groups will be the Europeans themselves, Naftali Bennett warned. Hours after the ruling, the European Parliament adopted a compromise resolution supporting, quote, in principle recognition of Palestinian statehood and the two-state solution, end quote, and calling for peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians to be, quote, advanced. You know, friends, you're looking at an animosity that goes back multiple millennia, back 3,500 years ago to Abraham, Sarah, Hagar's offspring, Ishmael. The original text of that court ruling had called for unconditional recognition. Or I think the story is actually referring back to the original text that the European Parliament used in adopting a compromise resolution supporting recognition of Palestinian statehood and the two-state solution. The original text had called for unconditional recognition in line with resolutions passed by several national legislatures in recent months, including Sweden. Shame on you, Brother Naphtali. Shame on you in Sweden for adopting that against your brother Judah, Benjamin, Levi, and really against yourself, because it's against all of the tribes of Israel, little known who they are by many in the world today. They are the sons of Joseph in the United States and the UK, the sons of Joseph being Manasseh and Ephraim, respectively, U.S., UK, and Reuben in France, and the other brothers around Europe. French troops. Friends, let's go to the next story. I got a couple more stories I want to cover, and then we'll have to end tonight's extended report. French troops patrol after attacks in Nantes, Dijon, and Tours. France is to step up police and military patrols in areas frequented by the public following recent attacks. Prime Minister Manuel Valls has said. He said up to 300 soldiers would be deployed around the country to boost security over the Christmas period. The attacks seemingly, and that's this week, that pagan holiday runs Thursday this week, friends. The attacks seemingly unrelated in Nantes, it's Nantes if you're an American, but Nantes, but in French, you got to nasalize that. Nantes, Nantes, Nantes. Dijon and Tours have left more than 20 people injured. One person injured in Monday's attack on a Christmas market in Nantes has been declared clinically dead. We've got a report in video by Hugh Schofield.
No panic, nothing dramatic, but in Paris and other cities, the Christmas holidays will be under surveillance. Extra troops to patrol alongside shoppers, tighter security at public buildings. It was the third attack in Nantes that tipped the balance. Even though in this car ramming at a Christmas market there's no evidence of an Islamist link, the danger is of a copycat effect. Lone, unbalanced individuals creating a pattern where before there was none. The Prime Minister, Manuel Valls, chaired a special cabinet meeting with security chiefs, trying to hit the right note, not fear-mongering, but not downplaying it either. France, he said, does face a terrorist threat. It is the challenge of our times.
Cette série d'événements est choquante.
This series of events is shocking and provokes a legitimate sense of anxiety. We want to protect and to reassure the people of France and tell them that all the services of the state have been mobilized.
Tous les services de l'État sont mobilisés.
3 potentially deadly attacks in 3 days. Inevitably, it's going to get people thinking. Though, as you can see, it doesn't seem to have made that much difference here. The crowd's as thick as ever on the Champs-Élysées. If some people do have a heightened sense of fear, it's not going to prevent them coming out and enjoying the Christmas spirit.
This man said he had no faith in the government to counter the terrorist threat. Fear is no protection against danger, he said, and here in the market we're a perfect target.
Ça doit arriver, ça arrivera quoi.
But if something's going to happen, it's going to happen, said these women. And it's not necessarily terrorism. It can be just isolated acts by people who are deranged. We shouldn't sink too far into fear. The terrorism threat appears to have loomed a bit closer these last few days, but life and Christmas will not be knocked off course. Hugh Schofield, BBC News, Paris.
Brother Reuben, they're not going to allow Christmas to be knocked off course. Well, way to go. Friends, I love our brothers in France. I love that French language. I studied French in college for 2 years. And hats off, Dan Apartian, to your father. He came into our French class one day. He was the head of the French department. We had a different instructor, but the head of the French department, Dijon Apartian. He took the class one day early in the school year, and he said, all right, now students, listen closely. In the next 5 minutes, or next 2 minutes, I think he even said, I'm going to teach you 500 French words and their meanings, their definitions and meanings, and you will remember them. We thought, oh boy, we're going to have this on a test. He's going to give us 500 French words in 2 minutes? And we've got to remember them? Well, it kind of was a joke in a way, but true. And I'm going to do the same thing he did. I'm going to share that with you, whether you've had French language or not. I'm going to give you, if you speak English, and if you're listening to this, you probably do, I'm going to give you the same lesson Mr. Apartian gave us. 500 French words in less than a minute, and you will remember them and their meanings. And what he said to it, we thought, boy, how's he going to do this? And the next thing he said was, Students, every word in English that ends in S-I-O-N or T-I-O-N is a French word. It has the same meaning in French it has in English. And he says the only difference is you put the French pronunciation to it. And in France, every syllable is accented equally. And so, for example, prescription in English would be prescription. En France have the same meaning. Elevation, elevation in French. Oh boy, we had 5. So, I held a lot of my French conversations with a lot of ease, just saying, hey, if I get stuck, just think of one of them 500 words that ends in S-I-O-N or T-I-O-N and just say that word in response to the French person, and, you're halfway there with the conversation. But I did attend one Feast of Tabernacles in France, on an ocean in France, where a couple of elderly widow ladies got a hold of me, and I learned more in that week from those 2 widow ladies who took the French position of speak French or die. No English here in this country. And, boy, they turned my French, college French, they turned it into real French. They sat there and made me speak things in French, and they would correct my grammar and explain it in French, and made me get it. Toute la famille. My head was smoking by the time I got through that week in France at that feast. Anyway, friends, let's go on to the next story. I just got a little bit of time left, and some of you are going to love this next story with a reporter gal in Russia. The headline on this story, friends, reads like this: Russian women won't trade lipstick for beetroot. In the midst of Russia's current currency crisis, a government senator, has been advising the country's women to use, this is not the government lady who's been doing that, but a government senator has been advising the country's women to use beetroot instead of imported lipstick. The senator, Igor Chermyshev, has also been quoted as saying, "Our women look nicer in Russian underwear than in French." Oh my, I didn't read this headline ahead of time, friends. What am I digging into here? All right, now, this lady here, Yael Levine, a writer and former journalist who lives in Moscow, said that she did not think Russian women would be trading their lipstick for beetroot anytime soon.
I don't think Russian women are going to be trading their lipstick for beetroot anytime soon. I think most of them look camera ready when they're at the gym. So I can't see au naturel really taking off here.
The trouble is, I know we can sort of look at a quote like that and smile, but underlying that, it just shows you, because there are vast economics at play here, but bit by bit, how much of this is creeping in to the everyday lives of ordinary people there.
No, people are very worried here. Putin, in his press conference last week, said that he expected the economy to rebound in 2 years. Of course, 2 years is a very long time in the life of a country. And even though the ruble has stabilized to some extent this week, you get the sense that people feel like the worst is still ahead of them. They are going to the stores, buying up electronics. There are crowds in M-Video, the major electronics store, at 1 in the morning, and in IKEA, buying everything at the old price before inflation kicks in and prices start going up. There are currency tourists coming from Finland and Belarus to take advantage of
And we know that the ruble has almost gone through the floor, the value of it. I think I'm right in saying that you get paid in dollars. Does that mean that you are immune from this? So what about the people that you know who are paid in rubles?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I told a friend about my article, about feeling a bit bad to be paid in dollars while people around me suffer because they're paid in rubles, and he works for a logistics and shipping company. He said, I'm paid in dollars, and it doesn't make me feel much better, because as the ruble falls, if the economy goes with it, I'm going to be out of a job, just like someone with a ruble-denominated salary.
Okay, well, let's see. She got out of that last question. She kind of snuck around that one a little bit, but Igor, where you said that this week the ruble has kind of stabilized. Now, that's kind of a little bit of a fluff in a way, friends, because how many days into this week are we? This is Tuesday night now, and we're only couple, 3 days into the week, and I think most people don't count the week the way some of us do. They count Sunday as part of the weekend, so the work week especially, Monday and Tuesday, we've only had 2 days into the week, and we talk about stabilizing a currency when it's already fallen to more than half of its value, to less than half of its value. If it stabilizes and doesn't increase, it's stabilizing down there at below half of its value. So, I mean, look, there's a little bit of air there that like, oh, things are okay when they're not, really. But God could keep them floating a little longer. It could turn around. Two things are causing that ruble to be down. One is the sanctions by the Western countries. And two is the oil prices being down low, for which a lot of us are very thankful. The common citizen, we're very thankful. Companies and certain countries are not so happy about that. All right, let's go to our last story for tonight, friends. A record 17,500 people have turned out for the latest anti-Islamization rally in the German city of Dresden, according to police estimates. 17,500 demonstrators sang Christmas carols and listened to speeches about immigrants and asylum seekers. Weekly rallies by a group called Patriotic Europeans Against the Islamization of the West, or Pegida, began in October. Several counter-demonstrations were being held yesterday. Laura Westbrook reports.
Their rallying cry is "We are the people." Their banners read, "Against religious fanaticism." This is Pegida, a group that's been protesting here in Dresden for weeks now. But this is the biggest rally so far.
What I've experienced, what my daughter is experiencing at school, Islam is not a religion of peace, and we have to deal with it. Our life as we know it in Germany is threatened by it.
The protesters say they are defending Christian values, but critics say they are promoting right-wing extremism.
It's about the asylum seekers. They do not make themselves at home here. They walk around hooded with slits for eyes. That's not done here. We have a different culture, and they have to assimilate.
Germany is facing a wave of incoming migrants. This year, it expects 200,000 asylum claims, more than any other country in the world. Many were from Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. The protests in Dresden have sparked counter-protests in many cities, with the largest here in Munich.
This is an event against Pegida, but also to send out a signal that you can also do it the other way around. Instead of excluding people, you can invite them in.
The sheer number of demonstrators gathering on both sides are forcing a public discussion on immigration. A debate which can no longer be ignored. Laura Westbrook, BBC News.
And friends, that's it for this Tuesday night report. Thanks for joining me. God willing, and the creek don't rise, we will be back tomorrow night. No reindeer, no old fat pagan saint, so-called, is going to get in our way, God willing. Until next time, friends, this is your host for Nightcast, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying good night and so long, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on COGTV.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.